This is Leading Detection, a Sedulo podcast where fraud fighters talk tech. Welcome back to the Leading Detection podcast. Today, we are joined by Radhika, who is Group Product Manager for Machine Learning at Alloy. Alloy, of course, is the identity and fraud prevention platform. Radhika, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to tap into a wealth of knowledge that you have in this space. We're going to be talking about machine learning and how machine learning is the only real option moving forward in fraud prevention. But yeah, to start off with, I'm interested about your story. Fraud. Did you choose fraud or did fraud choose you?
I feel like maybe a mix of both. So my career started in cybersecurity. And when I transitioned to Alloy and the Fintech world, I was honestly surprised by the scale and nuance of fraud that happened in financial institutions. So coming from the outside world, people picture simple things like credit card theft, right? But when you dig into it, the reality is much more complex. So like cybersecurity, fraud is adversarial. Actors adapt, they scale, and they target weak signals. So understanding those parallels has really shaped how I think about fraud. And so I feel like I would say fraud chose me and I didn't expect that, but it's actually been like a very fun, interesting industry to be a part of the past few years.
Yeah. It certainly drew you in by the sounds of it. So coming from cybersecurity, you focus more on product. Now, how's that all come together?
Yeah. So I think I've learned a lot about how coordinated and aggressive fraud can be just across the board. And it has made me think more about how things like Gen AI are really driving fraud forward and attacking industries in ways that we just didn't see before.
It's becoming incredibly easy, right? Let's go for financial institutions, banks. Defrauding them has become, the barrier to entry is super low. Talk
Yeah,
about that.
Gen AI has essentially democratized fraud, right? So it's collapsed the cost and skill required to craft highly convincing schemes. We see deepfake audios, deepfake videos, personalized phishing, synthetic identities, and these attackers are impersonating individuals with alarming credibility, right? And now they're doing it at just massive scales. So what used to take weeks of effort can be launched in minutes
Yeah.
and fully industrialized, right? It's its own industry. It's like a fraud industry.
Yeah. I mean, anything that's coming up a bit more recently, anything that you're, I don't know if impressed is the right word, but you know what I mean, how real examples of people are getting scammed that you're thinking, wow, that's...
Yeah, I think impressed honestly is the right word. Like the level of sophistication is truly insane. If we look at the tangible ways this is playing out, right? Banks are dealing with AI driven account takeover, where there's not just stolen credentials, but those stolen credentials are then paired with very convincing social engineering to bypass controls. We're seeing authorized push payments where customers are manipulated to actually sending the money themselves because they're receiving cloned voices or personalized messages impersonating banks. That type of fraud used to be somewhat rare and is now becoming incredibly common. And you're seeing banks send out warnings like, only like we won't send texts like that. We won't send calls like that. But you're seeing, especially in the elder community, elder fraud, things like that are just running rampant with the Gen AI stuff. And on the onboarding side, what I've seen a lot is that synthetic identities, which are taking bits of real information, bits of fake information, and creating a new identity, is super sophisticated. And real examples I see are fraudsters generating realistic documents, AI created faces. So a funny example we actually saw was a fraud attack happened. And if you actually looked at the document submitted, it was the same person. And they had used AI to like add mustaches, add different hair colors, add different things. And these are actually passing surface level verification checks. And because they can automate all of this, right? They're not just testing out one identity that took them a lot of time to build. They're testing hundreds and thousands. And then they're taking what they learned and they're selling it on the dark web. And so it's just scaling in a way that people are having a hard time keeping up with. Yeah. So there's I think the shift is that it's not just more believable, it's industrialized. And the same AI tools that are driving efficiency for banks are driving efficiency for fraudsters too.
Yeah, I mean, all them cool memes and videos of people saying, look what I created of myself." Other people out there thinking, "I can do some damage with that." So
Yep.
that's how the fraud is happening. Let's talk about how banks, financial institutions are trying to fight back, trying to stop it. So rules have been around for a long time. You've got a bit more of a modern approach,
Mhm.
um, you could say. Tell us about models.
Yeah. So let me do a quick background on rules for folks that don't fully know what that
Mm,
means. Traditionally, banks have relied on static rule sets, which are basically just giant if then logic trees for any engineers that know what that is, that are built to flag suspicious activity. And really big enterprise institutions have huge teams maintaining these rules. But
mm,
even then, you can imagine like a tree of hundreds of different rules looking for very small attributes quickly becomes untenable to maintain. Right. And then people leave the institution and knowledge leaves, and then folks are just kind of scared to touch it and scared to update things. Smaller institutions can come along and say, I don't even know what I should be looking for to detect fraud, right? And then it's just purely a guessing game. So, the fundamental problem with rules and why I'm here to talk about machine learning is that they're just blunt instruments at the end of the day,
mm,
right? Fraud isn't static, as we just talked about. Rules aren't adaptive. And so, if you're just approximating what you think might lead to fraud, you're going to get enormous false positive rates. So,
mm,
seeing folks come to Alloy needing help because they're seeing things like 98% of alerts getting reviewed by agents aren't
mm.
actually fraud, which is insanely high false positive rate,
Yeah.
right? Like that means that teams are spending the vast majority of their time investigating legitimate customers. And not only is that a waste of their time, it's creating friction for these good customers, which banks
Mm,
don't want to do. So that's where machine learning comes in,
yeah.
right? The alternative to handcrafted logic is machine learning models. So instead of defining what fraud should look like, models learn from real historical outcomes. They look at patterns in behavior
Yeah.
and transactional data associated with those patterns, and they can continuously refine what signals actually matter instead of just
Mm,
looking at static rules. Um, and that's what we built at Alloy, right? So one of the models I built at Alloy is called Fraud Signal. And with Fraud Signal, we've trained on confirmed fraud outcomes from real clients and behavioral data to detect patterns that would honestly just be impossible to encode manually in rules.
yeah.
And the result we see is precision, right? Like we have seen upwards of 80% drops in false positive rates.
Mm.
So, which is insane for clients. And that means less friction for good users and stronger fraud detection and less work for all the agents. So it's like an obvious win win win, which is why I'm like, everyone use machine learning.
What is the what's holding companies back? Why don't they just, "Hey, it makes sense, let's do it." Is
Yeah,
the
I
beauty
think
in
it's totally. It's easy to be a product and engineering person and be like, just do this. This makes more sense.
yeah,
Things are much more complicated than that, right? You have slews of model risk management stuff going on
yeah,
in the background. So there are tons of laws in place, correctly so, to prevent things like redlining and incorrectly discriminating against certain
yeah,
groups of people. And with rules, it's like a very direct audit, right? You can read it and be like, all right, that's what this is doing. I know that I'm passing all the rules properly. With models, you have to make sure that you have model governance documentation. Banks, especially bigger enterprise banks, have a lot of model validation that they have to go through.
yeah,
And I think there's also like a fear in it, right? AI went through a hype. It's all anyone ever talked about. It went through a, ooh, what does this actually mean? What's AI mean? What's machine learning mean? And I think that there's an appropriate level of caution
mhm,
that folks have. And we're starting to see that play out with honestly a lot of differences with like fintechs versus credit unions versus banks and their willingness to adopt. And it's the classic annoying business crossing the chasm reference, right? Where like you have the folks that are like, I'm ready to adopt, try this out. I understand ML a bit more and why it's important. You have the folks that are like, I would like to do this. I have a billion other things on my plate, and
Mm.
I have a large legal team that needs to take a look at this. And so there's a lot more stuff going on under the lid, but I do think it's the direction that we should all be moving towards in some way.
Do you think the association with traditional machine learning and generative AI all being thrown under the same kind of title of AI, do you reckon that's hindering the adoption a little bit at all?
I think so. I think that people throw AI around as a buzzword because it is a buzzword. And then I think because it's thrown out so frequently, it creates kind of this fear of, well, what actually are you doing? And what's actually happening here? And how is my data actually being used? That's like a huge thing that folks care about. There's tons of people like marketing AI that's not actually AI. So I think there's also this distrust in the
Yeah.
industry of, are you just saying you do AI or are you actually doing something? And where is it machine learning? Where is it generative AI? Like AI is just this huge bucket, right? Tons of things fall into it. And yeah, I do think that there is a like lack of trust and a lack of knowledge just generally.
Mhm.
And so I think that what Alloy has tried to do responsibly, and I think I appreciate, is not inflating the nomenclature, right? Like
Yeah.
when we say machine learning, we mean it. When we say Gen AI, we mean it. We're not just tossing that word out everywhere and creating kind of this like, I don't actually know what they're doing environment.
I wish that was the case. I'd personally love to just remove the word AI and have traditional machine learning or generative LLMs. I think
Yeah.
that would make the world a better place. Okay, so what if you think all traditional banks, they have rules, we've always done it this way, profitable, we're doing okay. How how do you wake them up to get them thinking about machine learning when you move them from rules?
Yeah. I talk through honestly what I just talked to you about today, which is the gap that rules have, what they're not
Mhm.
able to do. And I've found that if you get on the phone with the right people,
Yeah.
you explain, okay, this is, we do a lot of preliminary work. I think what really helps is seeing real numbers and seeing real data. And so I have a fantastic team of machine learning engineers that I really appreciate. And we will look at clients that come in and say, all right, these are your baseline rates coming into Alloy with your rules, which are typically things like 90% false positive rates. We look at their fraud capture rates. Banks often have fraud goals, right? Like we'd like
Yeah.
to reduce fraud by X% this year while also growing our membership base. And you can't just hit those rules or hit those goals without doing nothing, right? And so what really works with these bigger banks is saying, hey, looked at your we ran it
Mhm.
through these models. This is the projected impact of what could happen if we leverage the models. And then it's not a binary, now use this, right? It's an and statement, which is
Yeah.
something we also love to say at Alloy is you can use your rules that you love right now and use this machine learning model.
Mm.
We'll continuously track performance together and then slowly siphon more volume to the machine learning model as you get more comfortable, right? Like I am not under any illusion that a top 5 bank can just say, "Cool, I trust you. Great pitch, Radhika. We're gonna send all of our volume to you now." Right? Like that's I would love that. That would make my job a lot easier, but that's not
Mm.
happening. And so I think it's a trust exercise and it's data. We've done a lot of work on the right way to present data, the right way to talk about data with the right stakeholders, and I think that that is like such a key piece that a lot of people miss. It's like, are the right people in the room and are they understanding the data you're showing them?
Yeah. So if we were to get practical, if
Mhm.
we are those in the trenches, the fraud analysts, how are they responding to the switch?
Yeah, I think for fraud analysts, it's fantastic. Like if you are actually an agent that is having to review things and having to manage teams that are reviewing applications, they are more likely to want to adopt it
Mm.
versus some of the like legal teams and decision making teams. And fraud analysts is actually where Gen AI, since we're going to be
Yeah.
clear about the delineation of ML and Gen AI is huge for those agent teams specifically. So we're in what I'll call the co-pilot phase of AI, right? Like we hear
Yeah.
that phrase co-pilot come out so often. And what that really means for banks is the main application is to leverage AI to take a huge amount of manual work off of the agent teams and the analysts. And the reason that that is the main big use case that you're seeing pop up with folks like Breton AI and Parcha and other AI review agents, and
Yeah.
Alloy also has built out our own AI analysis system, is a lot of fraud and compliance reviews operationally heavy. Like, I don't think folks fully grasp how many documents they read through, how many watch list hits occur that they have to externally research, synthesize documentation, draft notes. That work is important, but it's
Mhm.
incredibly time consuming. And that's where I think that Gen AI and agentic AI is incredibly effective. So instead of having an agent say, oh, I got a watch list hit for Matt Brady, I'm
Yeah.
Googling Matt Brady to figure out if it's just a name match, if he actually has a suspicious business, like what's going on there. An agent can go and scrape all that information, read all those docs, tee it up for you so that an agent is still the one making a decision, right? I'm not saying banks are going to, like, agents are going to be obsolete tomorrow, right? Like, they still need to be there. A human is still there making the decision, but agentic AI is teeing it all up for you. So it's
Mm.
like the human is doing what humans should do, which is like critical thinking,
Yeah.
and the agent is removing all of the annoying manual work for you, which is what we've focused on at Alloy. We have an AI analysis tool that will do just that for you. And it's then embedded into the Alloy system. So it's just a full loop. But yeah, so I think if I was a fraud agent, I'd be like, nice. Less documents to read, less Googling to do. If I'm a fraud ops team, I'm like, my team is way more efficient. We're starting to run studies on like just how much more efficient you can be if you are using agentic AI in those flows. So it goes back to that like right? Like it's not, I think folks get scared when they're hear these things and they're like, oh, it's a binary thing. I have to use this or I can have people. And it's like, no, these should all be working together to make you stronger and make you more scalable as an organization.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a polarized society. You have to be one extreme or the other. But it's getting to a point, right, where these tools are needed because the amount of the sophistication of fraud, the amount of data you need to check. So operationally, it makes sense. But trust, right? So these people using at the end of the day, they're held accountable for what decision is made.
Mhm.
So what needs to happen for there to be full trust from those using the tools, not just the operational time saving?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the tools need to work, right? And you need to build AI that actually works and that folks are confident in. So I think part of that trust is, if we look at trust very literally, it's the model validation process. So it's a lot of data hygiene, it's having
Mm.
automated tests that you can prove, you can validate. It's making it so that the model makes so much sense and it's such a no-brainer that a client legal team can just be like, check, I've
Yeah.
signed off. And then I think the other part is really understanding the problem that exists and making sure that you are building for that problem. I think that that is something that I feel like, I think that's particularly something I feel proud of how we built at Alloy is this concept of ML looking at data holistically and not just case by case to show clients like we've built something that actually does what you need it to do and you
Mhm.
can trust what we've built and show them that with data. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we're all here for effectively is we're not here just to catch a bad transaction. We are looking to catch an attack.
Oh,
So if we were to look into how attacks actually happen and maybe look between coordinated attacks, how are we able to tell the difference between normal fraud and coordinated attacks?
yeah. That is a great question. So, a phrase that we always say we beat into the ground is that what it comes down to is fraud is committed by people, not transactions. And that sounds obvious, but I think that a lot of detection systems are hyper specialized. So, they look at APP fraud in one silo, Zelle in another, wire somewhere else. But if you look at only a single transaction in isolation, you miss the broader context, which is exactly kind of what you're alluding to. And if we take a simple example, I'm going to pick on you really quickly, Matt. So let's say you, Matt, want to do a $10,000 wire. That transaction alone might look perfectly legitimate, right? You have funds in your account. The amount isn't that unusual that it's going to trigger some alert. But what if earlier that day you had reset your password multiple times, changed your email, linked an external account, and the name doesn't quite match, right? All of those signals tell us that it's not just a $10,000 transaction happening, there's an attack unfolding here, right? And if a model looks holistically at behavior, it can connect those dots and say, this session looks risky. We want to stop this transaction before money can even move. And it can learn what fraud rings are doing and what their patterns of behavior are and start to link folks together and say, we're noticing this pattern of behavior and we can connect it to this other person and this other person. And now you're building a fraud ring out in your system. And that ties back also to the rules and the ML stuff we were talking about of, Matt, we might want to block your transaction, right? But let's say I'm a fantastic customer. My
Yeah.
login was perfect. I want to do that same $10,000 transaction. If you have siloed models or siloed rules, it does not know the broader context of Radhika has not done anything weird in this session, but Matt has. And
Mm.
so machine learning models that look at broader context can say, I'm going to let Radhika do that transaction, but I'm going to block Matt. And that's only possible because we're taking in all the data that's happening surrounding the transaction.
Mm.
And I think that's where a lot of folks miss, right? Is they just look at a transaction or just look at a login, and you're doing yourself a disservice when you do that because you have all that data there. You just need to look at it and start to it's really about connecting the pieces together to build a bigger picture. And then thinking more about what you said with fraud rings and broader fraud attacks, that is another side of the coin where we built another model at Alloy called Fraud Attack Radar. And what that does is monitor for fraud rings. And what we mean by that is it's not just looking at a volume spike. So you'd be shocked to know that the way that a lot of banks monitor for an attack is just saying, there was an uptick in volume, and let's say it's the weekend or it's 4th of July or someone's not at their computer. They're not constantly staring at their screen looking for just a simple volume spike. That's also a ton of noise. Who knows what could have happened that created that volume spike?
Mm.
If you have a model that's labeled on real fraud data and says, all right, Bank X. I know what normal looks like for you. You've got a wide variety of customer base. You've got teenagers that do weird transactions and adults that do different transactions and folks that have joint accounts. I know what your normal is. I've learned what your normal is. So when a conjunction of things happen that are not normal, I'm going to alert you about it. And it comes down to that same concept of being able to understand a baseline norm, being able to understand anomalies and how anomalies fit together to produce a fraud ring. And you're not just looking at Matt looks weird, Radhika looks weird, one thing happened, one spike happened, right? That's just not a way that you can scale your business and grow and detect fraud.
So in real life, it's a data problem, and ML models give more context. They give it in real time, and they're getting better as well the more we use them.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've just scratched the surface with the amount of things we can do with the data that we have. It's actually kind of shocking to me how much data we get that's just tossed away, or if folks aren't linking data correctly. And what I mean by that is there is a shocking amount of instances where you, Matt, might do a transaction and then same Matt might update your password people are not tracking that those are the same person doing both those things. They're just coming in all as individual data events. And so a lot of it is not even just like, can we build models to look at all the data we have? It's taking a step back and making people say, am I storing data properly and efficiently? And I don't think that's something that was on people's radar or something that people necessarily cared about too much, because if you're just looking at a password update in a silo, who cares if it's tied to a transaction, right? And so now that we're learning more about fraud, now that fraud is more sophisticated, it's causing us to go not just to ML, but like a step before into how are we even storing data? And that is not something that if you asked me 10 years ago if I'd be passionate about data storage and data linking, I'd be like, no, but it is. It's so important now.
The answers are in the links. And
Yeah.
with these models, we talk about fraud being a team sport now, it's global.
Yeah.
So how about different areas of the world? Is there a big difference between how the US and the Europe handle fraud and how the models are affected?
Yeah, definitely. We see even in like the UK versus the US, just massive differences in how they are approaching fraud and treating it. I think in the US, fraud is often treated as a cost of doing business, right?
Mm,
There's line items in the budget, it happens. And in the UK and parts of Europe, especially with APP fraud,
yeah.
reimbursement expectations are much stricter, right? And I think, as you would expect, that regulatory pressure forces institutions to invest more aggressively in prevention, not just detection after the fact. Because when liability shifts, right, like behavior changes. And so I think there are instances in the UK where they were thinking about this earlier. They were adopting ML in transaction monitoring earlier. I'm not claiming the UK is beating the US here, but like they have a bit of the upper hand and more knowledge in this. And we're seeing that as we expand to the UK and start talking to those clients. And then there's my personal, like, least favorite thing that the US does, which is checks. And my
I can't
family,
get my head.
my family and
Yeah,
friends are sick of me
being
ranting about
not
this.
a third. I've not sent a check.
Oh, it's
I got my
crazy.
first I got my first checkbook when I was maybe 16, and I think I've written 3 in my life.
It's
And the
and then
US
even now, my, like, landlord only takes checks for rent, which is insane. I'm like, "It's 2026. You have to know that that's bad." And so because the US accept checks, which are so antiquated, and you can't verify that, this signature actually belonged to this person, and, this person didn't just like, conduct mail theft and lift this ink off. Like, there's so many ways to do it. Catch Me If You Can, fantastic film with Leonardo DiCaprio, talks about this perfectly. But what happens because we have antiquated systems is that we're building all these super complicated models that are like, does this look like a normal check Matt would send? Does Matt usually send checks to Radhika? And you see all these like complicated systems in the US that you don't have to build in the UK and other parts of Europe,
Mhm.
because check fraud is rampant. It's insane. It's up like 200% in every bank saying that like it's the top issue that they care about right now. And my personal vendetta is like, just get rid of them. I can't.
Yeah.
People love them for some reason. But it's every time I go home, I tell my grandparents, I'm like, do not mail a check. If you mail a check, make it look like something else. Like, there was some thing in the US in the news where it was like some USPS worker was found having committed $2 million in check fraud because he was just stealing checks because you can see what they look like in the mail. It's just insane.
It's crazy. I mean, if an event might happen where it triggers, but it's crazy to think that checks are still
Yeah.
go. But when it comes to the banks, I mean, noticing things like 200% in check fraud, it's on the radar a lot more. But across the board, who would you say is actually doing fraud prevention best right now?
Uh, that's a good question. I don't want to rank them as best. I don't want to offend anybody listening, but I would say that fintechs and credit unions are just quicker to adopt naturally than enterprise banks. And I think that is what you'd expect, right? Fintech teams are coming in with more technical folks that are comfortable with machine learning, comfortable with AI, know that it's needed day one, and they have the benefit of not having 40-year-old systems, right,
Yeah.
that have to try to rip and replace. You see an implementation for a fintech just be infinitely quicker, right, than an implementation at a bank. And so I think part of it is technological comfortability and
Mhm.
then a willingness to adapt, pick up faster. Like fintechs are way more likely to implement Gen AI. Credit unions also, this was surprising to me, honestly, but credit unions are quick to be like, we're trying to scale fast, we're trying to grow. We know we can't do that with humans, and it's easier to make changes. Whereas it's almost ironic because I think enterprise banks need machine learning the most because to change a rule or change something in their fraud detection, there's probably like 30 people that have to approve that, right? They're just massive organizations. But with how fast fraud is going, that can't be the process, but it's also a long process to get new models and things like that put in. So they're just slower naturally just because of the way that they're organized.
Mm.
Um, they have bigger teams in place detecting fraud. It kind of all balances itself out depending on what you're focusing on. But I would definitely say that like the fintechs and the credit unions are like, I want it, give it to me. Like, let's take a look at the models you have.
Yeah. Nice. And if we was to start wrapping this up now, let's talk about product, your kind of
Mhm.
areas of specialism. What would you say the hardest part about building fraud tools?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, a lesson that I wish I could travel back 2 years ago to myself and
Yeah.
tell her is figure out what data you need to collect for training now. I think you spend a lot of time on what am I going to build? What inputs do I need? What is the model going to decision on? But for supervised machine learning, you need training data.
Yeah.
And getting that data is not always easy, right? Or figuring out the right way to get it. And so if you wait too long, it's hard. And then
Mm.
the second part is building in this regulatory environment, right? I have never had to, luckily, I have a fantastic legal team. I love working with the lawyers at Alloy, but I've never had to work with lawyers this much before, right?
Mm.
So there are so many governance processes and model validation and compliance risk that goes into these models, like I mentioned before. And the consequence of that is that we have to build out extensive documentation. We have to be very careful about how we answer things. We have to loop in our legal teams a lot. And I think a challenge that organizations face is hiring the right legal folks that are used to moving at the pace of product engineering at a startup, right?
Yeah.
Like product engineering is moving quick. And I think that legal isn't always at other places moving that quickly. And we're fortunate enough to have our lawyer, Nikki, is awesome. She comes from machine learning, she understands it. And so she's able to just pick things up and help crank out documents for us and help move forward. But I think that that is like a particular challenge for product in ML and AI. Is it's not just up to you, like there's other regulations coming into play here.
Yeah. And how about kind of making machine learning or ML decisions easier to explain, I guess?
Yeah, so we try to create a explainable model so that it's not just a black box, right? I don't want to get into a situation where like we're telling you this person's high fraud risk. I won't tell you why. Just trust me. That's not going to work, right? And so we've created explainability, but you also have to balance explainability with I don't want to tell you everything that the model is doing because I don't want you to just go build your own version of it, right? And so it's finding that layer of granularity that provides all the context that somebody needs into why something was fraudulent. Like, they have a dormant account and they're doing suspicious transactions
Mm.
and making sure you're creating a level of explainability without giving away everything you're doing. And I think that there are definitely some models out there that are just like, trust us. And that's hard, right? Like you need to help, especially in banks, there's audit trails, right? You can't just say that score told me to do something. So I did it. There's audit trails behind it, right?
So let's wrap it up with one final question. What's the end game? Where are we trying to get to with these tools?
Yeah. I think the future of bank decisioning should be fully reliant upon machine learning models that are constantly evolving. The benefit of designing generalized machine learning models, and what that means is that like it's trained on a bunch of different folks' data, not just designated to one bespoke client, is
Mhm.
that the model learns about fraud you didn't know about. It learns about, this bank saw this, so now I know to look for that. So I think uh, going towards a future where the core of your decisioning is a model that's smarter than what you're able to do, and Gen AI that is just accelerating all of the manual tasks, and agentic AI that's accelerating those manual tasks that agents have to do. And I think getting to a world where a lot of the review queue experience is starting to become like negligible because you have more precise decisioning, you have less reviews, and then the reviews that do happen can have agentic AI. So it's this loop of just smarter,
Yeah.
better fraud detection that you can't have today. And I think there's so much room to grow. And I think we're just scratching the surface with fraud rings. I feel weirdly nerdy about fraud today. I'm like, what are other fraud ring models we can build? Like other ways we're not looking for spikes. And I think it's fun because fraud's never going to stop changing. Folks are
Yeah.
never like the people that do it are smart. I'm not pretending they're not smart. They are leveraging AI. And so if you're not learning about tech the way they're learning about tech, you're going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, fraud has always been around. It's not
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere. So I guess it is just the only option is
Yeah.
to keep up. Right. Well, Radhika, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. What are you excited about this year? What have you got coming up?
Yeah. So Alloy, I'm really excited about our AI analysis tool that we released very recently. I touched on it a bit, but we're really focusing on that agentic process that I was talking about and starting
Yeah.
with easy, quick things like KYB and watch list. But I think that the future is like huge. And other thing I'm most excited about is the like fraud attack radar model that I talked about, tying in AI with the ML models and saying, we detected a fraud attack. Now this AI tool can tell you everything that went wrong. Here are the users that went wrong. And I've already bundled up emails to send to pause their accounts, or I've already, like, all the attack triage, all of that is just like one full circle loop. And so I think the detection, the machine learning is part one. And then
Yeah.
like we're entering like earning our way into phase two of how can we close the loop now? And I think that's super cool. And I think there's so much we can do there.
Nice. Well, a lot to work on. Sound promising, but it sounds like your work's cut out. If anyone
Yeah.
wants to keep up with that or catch up with you, where can they do so?
Yeah. You can check me out on LinkedIn, check out Alloy. We're posting blogs all the time. And we're super excited to see what comes next.
Awesome. Well, I'll be keeping an eye as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. It certainly was. And to the listeners, until next time, ciao for now. Want to hear more about fighting fraud with tech? Subscribe to Leading Detection wherever you get your podcasts.